Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're diving into something I think you'll find super interesting. We're going to be talking about probability, coincidence, and how those things kind of shape how we see the universe.
Oh, yeah, definitely a fascinating topic.
Right. And the book that we're using for this deep dive is You Are Probability, Surfing the Matrix. It's this collection of essays that goes into the physics of, like, awareness. And it asks some, well, pretty big questions. Things like, could the universe actually be, like, designed for us? Or is our existence just this crazy, improbable accident?
Yeah, I mean, that's a question that people have been thinking about forever, philosophers, scientists. And this book, it brings some new ideas to the table, starting with the idea that probability is way more important in our lives than we think.
Okay, so let's break this down a little. One of the first things that I thought was really cool was this idea of Littlewood's Law of Miracles. Now, I get that statistically, given enough time, anything's possible. But this law takes it to like a whole other level.
So Littlewood was a mathematician, and what he said was that if you define a miracle as like something that only happens 1 in a million times, then statistically we should see a miracle about once a month.
Whoa, really?
Yeah. But of course, he wasn't talking about like supernatural events. He was more pointing out that our experience is limited, so we don't have a good sense of what's actually rare.
So it's not that we're breaking the laws of nature or anything, but that in this huge universe, things that seem impossible are actually more common than we realize.
Exactly. When you look at all the events happening across the entire universe, those 1 in a million things, well, they aren't so miraculous after all. It's like our perspective shifts. We go from thinking of these events as like these weird exceptions, and we start to see them as just part of this bigger probabilistic fabric.
Makes you think about all those times when you have all these coincidences happen, one after another. And it feels way too perfect to be random, right? The book actually has a name for that, desultory decussation.
I've never heard that before. What's that?
It sounds really academic, but basically it's just a fancy way of saying meaningful coincidences. Like when two things that seem completely separate suddenly intersect.
Okay, I see.
But, the authors make a point of saying this isn't about like mystical forces or destiny controlling everything.
Right.
It's just that when you have enough data points, patterns are going to show up. Think about those stories you hear of people winning the lottery twice with the same numbers. It seems crazy, but statistically, it's not that out there.
It makes sense when you think about it that way.
Yeah, it's more about the math playing out than some, like, cosmic plan. I mean, it makes sense, but sometimes it's hard to shake that feeling that it's all meant to be.
Yeah, I know what you mean. And that's where apophenia comes in.
Apophenia. What's that?
It's the human tendency to see patterns in random stuff, even when there's no real connection.
Oh, I do that all the time. I remember once I was going through a job change and kept seeing these license plates that, like, seemed to be talking directly to my situation.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
At the time, it felt like the universe was, like, sending me signs.
The book actually has a similar story. And the point is that our brains are like wired to look for meaning.
Right. Even in random things.
Yeah, it's this survival thing that helps us make sense of the world, but it can also make us misinterpret coincidences as something more significant.
So even though it's natural to look for patterns, we've got to be careful about letting our biases mess up our interpretations. Like a reality check. Am I really seeing a sign or am I just making stuff up?
Totally. It's good to question those moments when you think you've figured it all out. Maybe there's no deeper meaning. Speaking of how our intuition about probability can be so wrong, we have to talk about the birthday paradox.
Yeah, the birthday paradox. Classic. It seems so counterintuitive, but then the math, like, totally makes sense.
Exactly. If you have a group of just 23 people, there's a 50-50 chance that two of them will share a birthday. It seems crazy, but it all comes down to understanding how probabilities work together. It's not about one person matching another. It's about all the possible combinations you can get within that group.
Right, right. The more people you add, the more likely it is to have a shared birthday. It just doesn't feel like it should be that way. It really shows how bad we are at guessing probabilities.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And this all leads to one of the most mind-blowing parts of the book, You Are Probability, which they illustrate using this sperm analogy.
Dude, this part seriously blew my mind. It's about how unlikely it is for any of us to even exist. Like, starting with the odds of one specific sperm cell reaching the egg.
Yeah.
Think about it. Trillions of sperm, millions of eggs, and then all the generations of ancestors that had to come together perfectly over, like, millions of years to create you. The odds are insane.
Astronomically small.
It's almost impossible to grasp. And yet, here we are. Does that mean we're, like, destined to exist? Like, it was all planned out?
That's a good question, but the book isn't trying to argue for fate or destiny. It's more about pointing out that life itself is a victory against, like, impossible odds. You, me, everyone listening, we're all incredibly lucky to be here.
It's a humbling thought, for sure. And on top of all that, the book talks about this other mind-blowing idea, the mathematical universe hypothesis.
Oh, yeah.
This was proposed by a physicist, Max Tegmark, and he says that the universe isn't just described by math, but that it actually is math.
So are we, like, living in the Matrix or something?
Haha, kinda. Think about it like this. Your phone has all these apps and icons, right?
Yeah.
But underneath, it's all code, algorithms, and data. Techmark's saying that our physical world might be like the projection of a deeper level of math.
Whoa, okay.
So the reality we see is like the user interface, and the underlying math is the code making it all work. It's wild.
It really is. And, it kind of ties back to what we were saying about how unlikely our existence is.
How's that?
Well, if the universe is basically math at its core, then even life emerging, no matter how crazy the odds seem, is still just a consequence of these mathematical rules doing their thing.
So it's like the universe is playing out a mathematical equation, and we're just one of the results?
In a way, yeah. And it begs the question, what are the implications of that? Are we just cogs in this giant mathematical machine? Or does it mean something even bigger?
Now this is where it gets really interesting. The book tells this story about a surfer who wins a championship because of two perfectly timed waves. And it makes him start thinking, were those waves meant for him? Was it a sign of like some higher purpose or design?
I love those kinds of stories. They make you wonder.
Right. Like sometimes everything just lines up perfectly, and you can't help but think there must be some unseen force at work.
But the book takes this in a really cool direction.
Okay, what happens?
It analyzes the situation and points out that those waves, as amazing as they seemed, were really just the result of weather patterns and the surfer's skill at taking advantage of the opportunity.
So it's not like the universe was bending the rules for him. It's more about understanding the rules and being ready to ride that wave when it comes along.
Yeah,
It's like a metaphor for how probability works in our lives. We can't control everything that happens, but we can learn how to surf those probabilities. We can make smarter choices and grab opportunities when they come up.
love that.
Okay, but zooming out to the big picture again, does that also apply to how the universe is designed? Are we mistaking the rules of the game for something more? Like, are we seeing intention and design where there's really just probability and natural laws?
Man, that's a deep question. And it's one that we're going to keep exploring as we dive deeper into this book. We're going to see what it all means for how we see the universe and our place in it.
You know, that surfer analogy really stuck with me. It's like, instead of just waiting for fate to happen, we actually have a role to play in shaping our lives, right? Even though the universe can be pretty unpredictable.
Totally. It's empowering. We're not just like helpless. We can learn about probability and use that to make our way through life's crazy maze.
Okay, but does that mean we just throw out ideas like luck and fake? I mean, we use those words all the time to talk about what happens in life.
I wouldn't say throw them out completely. I mean, they're useful ways to talk about things we can't predict. But when we understand probability, it helps us avoid that magical thinking. Like, not every coincidence is a sign from the universe?
Right. It's like we can still appreciate the mystery of life, but we don't need to come up with these supernatural explanations for everything.
Exactly. We can marvel at the fact that we even exist, with all the things that had to line up perfectly. But we don't have to think it was all part of some big plan.
So we've talked about how probability affects our personal lives, but how does understanding it change how we see the world as a whole?
Well, it definitely makes you think more critically. Instead of just accepting things the way they seem, you start asking questions. You look for natural explanations before jumping to supernatural ones.
So like instead of thinking every coincidence is a sign, we ask ourselves, what are the chances of this happening randomly? And a lot of times the odds are higher than we think.
Yeah, and that leads to a more realistic view of the world. It also makes you realize how connected everything is. Remember the surfer. His success wasn't just about him being good, it was a weather, the ocean currents, when the competition was held, all these things coming together.
That's true. It's like we're all part of this giant system influenced by all these forces, big and small, and even random events can have a huge ripple effect.
Exactly. We're not just individuals doing our own thing. We're all interconnected, and the laws of probability affect us all.
It's kind of like a cosmic dance with everything moving and interacting in ways we might never fully understand.
I like that. And knowing that makes you humble. Like, we're not the center of the universe. We're just a small part of something much bigger. And it also makes you feel awe. When you think about how unlikely it is that we even exist, how many things had to go right, it makes you appreciate life even more.
It's strange, but it's true. Understanding how much is due to chance actually makes our existence feel more meaningful.
For sure. It lets us see the beauty in both the randomness and the order of the universe. Meaning isn't about a predetermined plan, it's about this incredible, improbable journey.
So where do we go from here? How do we use this knowledge about probability in our everyday lives? It seems like such a big concept. How do we make it practical?
Well, one way is in decision making. When we understand the odds, we can make better choices, knowing the risks and benefits.
Like it's like playing poker, right? You have to know the probabilities to make smart bets. And we can do the same thing in life, whether it's about money, careers, or even relationships.
Exactly. And more than that, understanding probability helps us be okay with not knowing what's going to happen. Life is full of surprises, and trying to control everything just makes you stressed.
It's like learning to surf those waves of probability instead of fighting the current.
Exactly. It's finding that balance between trying to make things happen and accepting what we can't control.
This deep dive into probability has really made me think it's not just about numbers and equations, it's about so much more.
It really is. It touches on these huge questions about life and makes us rethink how the universe works. And honestly, it's something we'll probably keep wrestling with as we try to figure out where we fit in this whole grand scheme of things.
It really is. And, it's funny, we've been talking about how understanding probability can help us make better decisions, but it also kind of makes me wonder if it makes those decisions feel less important.
Oh, what do you mean?
Like if everything is, ultimately just a matter of chance, does that take away our sense of like, being in control?
That's an interesting point. I think it gets at this fear people have that, embracing probability means giving up control, becoming like passive bystanders in this random universe. But I think it's actually the opposite.
Really? How so?
Because recognizing that chance plays a role doesn't mean we can't make choices. It just helps us make those choices with a better understanding of like what we're dealing with. Instead of pretending we have complete control, we can accept the limits of our influence while still actively trying to shape our lives.
So it's about finding that middle ground between like setting intentions and accepting things as they are, right? Between making choices and knowing we can't predict or control every outcome.
Yeah, exactly. Think of it like a sailor navigating the ocean. They can't control the wind or the waves, but they can use their knowledge of navigation, their skills, to chart a course and reach their destination.
I like that analogy. So it's not about fighting the unpredictable. It's more about learning how to work with it, like surfing the currents of probability instead of trying to control them.
Exactly. And I think that's where the real power comes from. Not from getting rid of uncertainty, but learning to like dance with it, making choices while being both confident and humble.
This whole conversation has really made me rethink things. It's humbling to realize how much is actually outside of our control.
It is humbling, but in a way, it's also kind of freeing. We don't have to carry the weight of trying to make everything perfect. We can just enjoy the ride, even when it takes unexpected turns.
Speaking of unexpected turns, the book ends with this really thought-provoking question, one that kind of sums up everything we've been talking about. Does the universe have a purpose, or are we just riding the waves of like a cosmic mathematical surf?
It's a huge question, and there might not be a single right answer. It's something we all have to figure out for ourselves. But I think if we can embrace probability, if we can see how chance and choice work together, we can find a deeper meaning in our place in the universe, even without all the answers.
It really makes you see things in a new light. Well, thanks for taking us on this deep dive into the world of probability. It's been amazing.
My pleasure. It's been a great conversation.
And to everyone listening, keep exploring, keep asking those big questions, and stay open to all the possibilities. Until next time.